The helicopter blades cut through the desert air like razor wire, their rhythmic thump barely audible over the roar of engines as the UH-60 Black Hawk descended toward the landing zone. Inside the cramped cabin, 12 elite operators sat in complete silence, their faces painted black, eyes focused on the mission ahead. This wasn't just any team. These were Navy SEALs, the most elite special operations force in the world, heading into one of the most dangerous missions of the Iraq War. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mission briefing had been crystal clear. Infiltrate a fortified compound 20 miles outside of Fallujah, eliminate high-value targets responsible for coordinating insurgent attacks against coalition forces, and extract critical intelligence. What made this mission different wasn't just the level of security surrounding the target. It was the presence of someone who, according to traditional military doctrine, shouldn't have been there at all. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez sat toward the back of the helicopter, her demolitions equipment secured tightly against her chest. At 28 years old, she had already earned a reputation as one of the most skilled explosive ordnance disposal specialists in the entire U.S. military. Her hands, steady as a surgeon's, had disarmed over 200 improvised explosive devices during her 3 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. She could identify the signature of different bomb makers by the way they twisted their wires, could calculate blast radius and structural damage in her head faster than most people could work a calculator. But tonight, she wasn't supposed to be here. The team leader, Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Razor Morrison, had made his position abundantly clear during the pre-mission briefing. Morrison was a 15-year veteran of the SEAL teams, a man whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his unwavering adherence to traditional military protocols. He had led over 60 successful operations across 3 different theaters of war, and he had never, not once, worked with a female operator in a direct combat role. "I don't care what the brass says," Morrison had declared in the briefing room just 6 hours earlier, his weathered face set in stone as he addressed the assembled team. "This is a SEAL operation. We've trained together, bled together, and we know each other's capabilities inside and out. I'm not about to compromise the safety of this team or the success of this mission by introducing an unknown variable." The unknown variable he was referring to sat quietly in the corner of the briefing room, reviewing technical specifications for the explosive charges that might be needed to breach the compound's reinforced structures. Maria had said nothing during Morrison's speech, but those who knew her could see the familiar tightening around her eyes, the same expression she wore when facing a particularly complex IED. The decision to include Maria on the mission hadn't come from Morrison or even from the SEAL command structure. It had come from the very top of Special Operations Command based on intelligence that suggested the target compound contained a sophisticated underground bunker system that conventional breaching methods might not be able to penetrate. The walls were reportedly 3 feet thick, reinforced with steel and concrete, designed to withstand everything from mortar attacks to bunker buster bombs. The satellite imagery shows blast-resistant construction unlike anything we've encountered in this theater, the intelligence officer had explained, pointing to grainy black and white photographs that revealed the compound's layout. Standard C4 charges and det cord aren't going to cut it. We need someone who understands the science of controlled demolition, someone who can calculate precise charge placement to create the maximum structural damage with minimal risk to our operators. That someone was Maria Gonzalez. But Morrison's objections went deeper than simple tactical concerns. Like many in the special operations community, he believed that certain lines should never be crossed, that some missions required a level of physical and psychological toughness that could only be maintained within the brotherhood of male warriors who had earned their place through blood, sweat, and shared sacrifice. The SEALs weren't just a military unit. They were a brotherhood bound by traditions that stretch back to the frogmen of World War II. She hasn't been through BUDS, Morrison had argued, referring to the notorious basic underwater demolition/SEAL training that had broken countless would-be operators. She doesn't know what it means to be part of this team. When the shooting starts, when everything goes to hell, I need to know that every person next to me will hold the line. The other members of the team had listened to this debate with the stoic silence that characterized elite operators. They respected Morrison's leadership and understood his concerns, but they also knew that mission success often required adaptation and flexibility. Staff Sergeant Tommy Patterson, the team's medic, had worked with Maria during a joint training exercise 6 months earlier and had been impressed with her technical skills and calm demeanor under pressure. Petty Officer First Class Mike Rodriguez, the team's heavy weapons specialist, had heard stories about Maria's work in Mosul, where she had single-handedly neutralized a complex IED network that had been terrorizing coalition patrols for months. As the helicopter continued its approach to the landing zone, Morrison reviewed the mission timeline one final time. The compound was surrounded by high walls topped with razor wire, with guard towers at each corner manned by armed sentries. Intelligence suggested at least 20 enemy combatants inside, armed with AK-47s, RPGs, and possibly heavier weapons. The mission called for a coordinated assault from multiple entry points, with precise timing and overwhelming firepower to neutralize resistance before the enemy could mount an effective defense. But the real challenge lay beneath the surface. The underground bunker system represented a puzzle that had stumped military engineers and explosive specialists for weeks. According to intercepted communications, this wasn't just a hiding place. It was a command and control center where high-value targets planned and coordinated attacks against American forces throughout the region. The intelligence contained within those reinforced walls could save hundreds of lives and provide crucial information about insurgent networks operating across Iraq. The compound's defensive measures were sophisticated beyond anything typically encountered in the region. The main building sat atop the bunker entrance, with reinforced concrete stairs descending nearly 30 feet underground. The bunker itself was constructed using techniques borrowed from Cold War-era Soviet military engineering. Multiple chambers connected by narrow corridors with blast doors designed to contain explosions and prevent structural collapse. Traditional breaching methods would either fail to penetrate the defenses or cause so much damage that any intelligence inside would be destroyed. Maria had spent weeks studying the architectural plans, analyzing soil composition reports, and calculating the precise amount and placement of explosives needed to create a surgical breach. Her approach was fundamentally different from the brute force methods typically employed by military demolition teams. While most operators focused on creating the biggest explosion possible, Maria understood that controlled demolition was an art form requiring patience, precision, and an intimate understanding of structural engineering principles. The key isn't the size of the explosion, she had explained during a technical briefing that most of the SEAL team had attended reluctantly. It's understanding how force travels through different materials, how to create focused pressure waves that will compromise structural integrity without causing catastrophic collapse. We need to think like a surgeon, not a sledgehammer. Her methodology involved creating what she called stress cascades, carefully placed charges that would create a series of controlled failures in the bunker's support structure. By targeting specific load-bearing elements and calculating the timing of detonations down to milliseconds, she could essentially cause the reinforced concrete to tear itself apart from the inside. The technique required advanced knowledge of physics, engineering, and explosives chemistry that went far beyond standard military demolition training. Morrison had listened to her presentation with grudging respect, but remained unconvinced that the theoretical approach would work under combat conditions. All the calculations in the world don't mean anything when bullets are flying and you're working with a 30-second window, he had said afterwards. Combat is chaos, and chaos doesn't care about your engineering degree. The tension between theoretical expertise and practical experience created an undercurrent of uncertainty within the team. The other SEALs respected Morrison's combat leadership, but recognized that this mission required specialized skills that none of them possessed. Sergeant First Class Danny Wheels Washington, the team's communications specialist, had researched Maria's background and discovered that she held a master's degree in structural engineering from MIT, earned through the military's advanced education program.
Her academic credentials were impressive, but academic success didn't always translate to battlefield effectiveness. As the helicopter approached the landing zone, Maria reviewed her equipment one final time. Her custom demolitions kit contained a carefully selected array of explosives, detonators, and timing devices that she had assembled specifically for this mission. Instead of standard C4 plastic explosive, she carried a combination of different compounds, some designed for cutting steel, others optimized for fracturing concrete, and several exotic military-grade explosives that were rarely used outside of specialized engineering applications. The centerpiece of her kit was a device she had developed herself during her previous deployment, a shaped charge array that could focus explosive force with surgical precision. The device consisted of multiple small charges connected by a sophisticated timing system that could control detonation sequences with microsecond accuracy. When properly configured, the array could create what amounted to a controlled earthquake, sending precisely calculated shockwaves through solid concrete to create fracture patterns that would compromise structural integrity without causing total collapse. But the device had never been tested under combat conditions, and Maria knew that Morrison's concerns about untested equipment weren't entirely unfounded. The difference between laboratory conditions and battlefield reality could be measured in the lives of the operators who would be depending on her expertise. The helicopter's crew chief held up 5 fingers, indicating 5 minutes to the landing zone. Morrison began his final equipment check, ensuring that each team member was ready for the mission ahead. His M4 carbine was loaded with armor-piercing rounds, his night vision goggles were functioning properly, and his communication equipment was set to the correct frequencies. Every piece of gear had been tested and proven in previous operations. He glanced across the cabin at Maria, who was making similar preparations with her demolitions equipment. Her movements were efficient and purposeful, showing none of the nervousness that might be expected from someone facing their first SEAL mission. She had requested and been granted the same body armor and weapons as the rest of the team, and her physical conditioning was clearly sufficient for the demands of the operation. But Morrison's doubts went beyond questions of physical capability or technical expertise. The dynamics of a SEAL team were built on trust, shared experience, and an almost telepathic understanding developed through countless hours of training and combat. These men had learned to anticipate each other's actions, to communicate through subtle gestures and expressions, and to function as a single organism under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Introducing a new element into this carefully balanced system, regardless of individual qualifications, represented a risk that Morrison was reluctant to accept.
The landing zone was a flat stretch of desert approximately 2 miles from the target compound, chosen for its concealment from enemy observation posts and its proximity to the planned approach route. As the Black Hawk touched down, the team moved with the fluid precision of a well-rehearsed dance, each operator exiting the aircraft and taking their assigned position in the defensive perimeter within seconds of touchdown. Morrison used hand signals to direct the team's movement toward their objective, maintaining strict noise discipline as they navigated through the rocky terrain. The desert landscape provided excellent concealment, but also presented challenges. Loose rocks could create noise that would alert enemy sentries, and the open ground between their position and the compound offered limited cover for the final approach. Maria moved with the team, her heavier demolitions pack requiring slight modifications to her movement pattern, but not slowing the overall advance. She had trained extensively with similar loads during her EOD deployments, learning to balance speed with the need to protect sensitive, explosive equipment. Her weapon handling was competent, if not quite at the level of the seasoned SEALs around her, but she maintained proper positioning and followed the team's tactical movement protocols without difficulty. The intelligence picture continued to develop as they approached the compound. Thermal imagery from overhead surveillance showed heat signatures consistent with approximately 20 individuals inside the main building, with additional heat sources indicating generator-powered equipment in the underground areas. The guard towers were manned as expected, with sentries maintaining routine patrol patterns that suggested they were not expecting an immediate threat. Morrison called a halt approximately 400 meters from the compound perimeter and established an observation post behind a cluster of large rocks that provided concealment and fields of fire toward the target. Through his night vision scope, he could see the details of the compound's defensive preparations, the razor wire, guard towers, and reinforced gates that would need to be overcome during the assault. But his primary focus was on the main building, where intelligence suggested the bunker entrance was located. The structure was larger than typical residential compounds in the region, with thick walls and small windows that indicated defensive construction. Most importantly, thermal imaging showed a distinct temperature differential in the building's foundation area, confirming the presence of underground spaces that couldn't be accessed through conventional entry points. "Target building confirmed," Morrison whispered into his radio, updating the command post on their progress. "Defensive positions appear consistent with intelligence reports. We have eyes on multiple sentries and guard positions." He turned to Maria, who was studying the compound through her own night vision equipment. "What do you see?" he asked, genuinely curious about her assessment of the demolition challenges. Maria took her time before responding, methodically examining different sections of the building and correlating what she observed with the architectural plans she had memorized. "The main structure shows signs of reinforcement beyond standard construction," she said quietly. "Look at the foundation line. It's significantly thicker than necessary for a building this size, which confirms underground construction. The thermal signature suggests the bunker system extends further than we thought, probably multiple levels." She pointed to specific areas of the building where heat patterns indicated different construction materials. "Those areas show steel reinforcement, probably rebar mesh, designed to prevent structural collapse from explosive damage. The entry point is definitely in the rear section, but there are probably secondary access points that aren't shown in our intelligence." Morrison found himself impressed by her analytical approach, though he remained skeptical about how theoretical knowledge would translate to practical application under fire. "How long do you need for the breach?" he asked. "Depends on what we find when we get closer," Maria replied. "If the construction matches my calculations, I can create a precision breach in under 10 minutes. But if there are additional reinforcements or different materials than expected, it could take longer." The timeline was crucial because the team's window of opportunity was limited by multiple factors. Enemy reinforcements could arrive from nearby positions within 20 minutes of the initial assault, and maintaining the element of surprise required swift, decisive action. Every minute spent on breaching operations was a minute that increased the risk of discovery and counterattack. Morrison made the decision to begin the final approach, dividing the team into 3 elements for the coordinated assault. The first element would neutralize the guard towers and create a diversion at the front gate. The second element would secure the main building and eliminate any resistance. The third element, consisting of Morrison, Maria, and 2 other operators, would focus specifically on accessing the underground bunker. As they moved closer to the compound, Maria reviewed her breach plan one final time. The key was speed and precision. She would have only minutes to assess the actual construction, place her charges, and create an opening large enough for the team to enter. The shaped charge array would be her primary tool, but she also carried conventional explosives as backup in case her advanced techniques proved inadequate. The weight of responsibility was not lost on her. The success of the entire mission, and potentially the lives of her teammates, depended on her ability to solve a problem that had stumped conventional military engineers. She had confidence in her technical skills and her equipment, but combat had a way of introducing variables that no amount of planning could anticipate. Morrison glanced at her as they approached their final assault position. Despite his reservations about her presence on the mission, he had to admit that her professional competence was evident. She moved with purpose and confidence, showed no signs of nervousness or hesitation, and had demonstrated technical knowledge that exceeded anything he had encountered in traditional military demolition training. But the real test was still ahead. The compound lay before them in the darkness, its defenses formidable, but not insurmountable for a well-trained SEAL team. The question that would be answered in the next hour was whether Maria Gonzalez could prove that her unconventional approach to demolition could succeed where traditional methods had failed, and whether she could earn the respect and trust of the warriors who had initially rejected her presence among their ranks. The assault was about to begin.
The first shots rang out at 0347 hours, shattering the desert silence like thunder. Tank Rodriguez had taken his position with the M240B machine gun on a ridge overlooking the compound, and his suppressive fire raked across the guard towers with devastating accuracy. Tracer rounds illuminated the darkness in deadly streaks of light as the guards scrambled for cover, their surprise shouts echoing across the compound. Morrison's voice crackled through the team's radio system, "Execute! Execute! Execute!" The assault unfolded with the choreographed violence that characterized elite military operations. Doc Patterson and Wheels Washington approached the front gate under cover of tank suppressive fire, using breaching charges to blow through the reinforced steel barriers. The explosions sent debris flying in all directions, creating a cloud of dust and smoke that provided additional concealment for their advance. Meanwhile, Morrison led Maria and Petty Officer Second Class Rick Snake Thompson toward the rear of the compound, moving through the chaos toward their primary objective, the main building and its heavily fortified bunker entrance. The diversionary assault at the front gate was drawing enemy attention exactly as planned, but Morrison knew their window of opportunity was measured in minutes, not hours. As they reached the building's rear entrance, the sound of automatic weapons fire intensified from multiple directions. The enemy was responding faster than expected, with well-trained fighters taking defensive positions and returning coordinated fire. This wasn't the typical insurgent cell they had encountered in previous operations. These were professional soldiers with military training and discipline. "Contact front," Snake Thompson's voice came through the radio as enemy fighters appeared from concealed positions near the building. His M4 carbine chattered in controlled bursts, dropping 2 insurgents who had attempted to flank their position. Morrison added his own fire, using his superior night vision equipment to identify and engage targets that were invisible to the enemy in the darkness. Maria pressed herself against the building's rear wall, her heart pounding, but her mind focused on the technical challenges ahead. The gunfire around her was intense but not overwhelming. She had experienced combat before during her EOD deployments, though never at this level of intensity. Her training had prepared her for working under fire, but the SEAL mission represented a significant escalation in both danger and responsibility. "Building secured," came the radio call from inside the structure, where other team members had eliminated resistance and were beginning their search for intelligence and high-value targets. But the most important objective remained underground, behind barriers that conventional weapons couldn't penetrate. Morrison grabbed Maria's shoulder and pointed toward a heavy steel door at the building's rear corner, the entrance to the bunker system that their intelligence had identified. Even in the darkness, she could see that the door was significantly thicker than standard construction, with reinforced hinges and a locking mechanism that suggested serious defensive preparation. "This is it," Morrison said, his voice tight with urgency. "How long?" Maria approached the door with her equipment, immediately beginning the assessment process she had practiced hundreds of times in training. Her hands moved quickly but methodically, testing the door's construction, examining the surrounding wall structure, and calculating the precise placement needed for her shaped charge array. "Steel core with ceramic composite backing," she reported, running her hands along the door's edges to understand its construction. "The frame is welded directly into reinforced concrete, probably 8 inches thick. Standard breaching charges won't touch this." She opened her demolitions kit and began assembling her specialized equipment, working with the focused intensity of a surgeon performing a complex operation. The shaped charge array required precise calibration. Too little explosive force and the breach would fail. Too much, and the resulting explosion could collapse the stairway and tunnel system beyond, trapping any intelligence or personnel inside. Morrison watched her work while maintaining security, his M4 ready to engage any threats that might appear. The gunfire from other sections of the compound continued, with his teammates maintaining their diversionary assault and securing the upper levels of the building. But he could hear changes in the pattern of fire that suggested enemy reinforcements might be approaching from outside the compound. "Timeline?" he asked again, knowing that every second increased their risk of discovery and counterattack. 3 minutes for placement, 30 seconds for detonation sequence," Maria replied, without looking up from her work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, connecting detonators to explosive charges and inputting precise timing sequences into her electronic firing system. The device looked almost futuristic compared to traditional military demolition equipment, a sleek black box with digital displays showing millisecond timing intervals. As she worked, Maria explained her approach to help Morrison understand what she was doing. "I'm creating a cascade failure pattern," she said, placing the first shaped charge at a specific point on the doorframe. "The initial detonation will compromise the structural integrity of the locking mechanism, while secondary charges create focused pressure waves that will fracture the concrete anchor points." The technical explanation meant little to Morrison, but he could see the confidence and precision in her movements. This wasn't guesswork or improvisation. This was the application of advanced scientific principles to solve a complex engineering problem. Whatever his doubts about her presence on the mission, he had to admit that her expertise was genuine. "Charges placed," Maria announced, stepping back from the door and activating her firing system. The device emitted a soft electronic beep, indicating that all connections were secure and the timing sequence was armed. 30 seconds to detonation. Morrison keyed his radio to warn the rest of the team. "Breach in progress. Take cover from secondary blast effects." The countdown seemed to stretch forever, each second marked by the continued sound of gunfire from other parts of the compound. Maria stood beside her firing system, watching the digital display count down while mentally reviewing every aspect of her calculations. She had run similar scenarios dozens of times in training, but this was the first time her theoretical approach would be tested under actual combat conditions. At 0, she pressed the firing button.
The explosion was unlike anything Morrison had ever experienced. Instead of the massive, earth-shaking blast typical of military demolition, Maria's shaped charge array produced a series of precisely timed detonations that created a rhythmic percussion like a giant heartbeat. The sound waves seemed to penetrate through his body armor and into his bones, while the flash of multiple explosions illuminated the area in stroboscopic bursts of light. But the most impressive aspect wasn't the sound or the light. It was the surgical precision of the destruction. When the smoke cleared, the massive steel door that had appeared impregnable just moments before was gone, replaced by a perfectly rectangular opening that seemed almost too neat to be the result of explosives. The edges of the breach were clean and precise, with no jagged metal or structural debris that might impede their entry. "Jesus," Snake Thompson whispered, staring at the opening in amazement. "How the hell did you do that?" Maria was already moving toward the breach, her weapon ready and her night vision goggles activated for the descent into the underground bunker system. "Physics," she replied simply, but Morrison could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Her unconventional approach had succeeded beyond what anyone might have expected. The stairway beyond the breach descended at a steep angle, with reinforced concrete walls that showed the same level of sophisticated construction as the door they had just destroyed. Emergency lighting strips along the walls provided minimal illumination, suggesting that the bunker system had its own power supply independent of the main building above. Morrison took point as they descended, his weapon trained down the stairway, while Snake covered their rear and Maria prepared for whatever additional breaching challenges they might encounter. The air in the tunnel was cool and humid, with the distinctive smell of concrete and metal that characterized underground military installations. Intelligence had suggested that the bunker contained multiple chambers, but the actual layout was more complex than their briefings had indicated. The main tunnel branched into several smaller corridors, each leading to different sections of the underground complex. Heat signatures detected from surface surveillance had suggested approximately 6 to 8 individuals in the bunker, but determining their exact location would require systematic clearing of each chamber. "Multiple rooms ahead," Morrison whispered into his radio, updating the command post on their progress. "Beginning clearance procedures." The first chamber they encountered was clearly a communication center, filled with radio equipment, computers, and maps showing coalition patrol routes throughout the region. This was exactly the type of intelligence goldmine that had justified the risk of the mission. But their immediate priority was securing any personnel who might be hiding in deeper sections of the bunker. Maria examined the chamber's construction while Morrison and Snake continued their advance. The walls were the same reinforced concrete they had encountered above, but she noticed something that made her recalculate her assessment of the bunker's defensive capabilities.
The concrete showed signs of recent repair work in several locations, suggesting that the structure had been upgraded or modified within the past few months. "Boss," she called quietly, "this place has been hardened beyond our intelligence estimates. Look at these wall modifications." Morrison turned back to examine what she was pointing out. Sure enough, sections of the walls showed newer concrete patches and additional steel reinforcement that hadn't appeared in their pre-mission briefings. Someone had invested significant time and resources in making this bunker nearly impregnable to conventional attack. The discovery had immediate tactical implications. If the bunker was more heavily fortified than expected, there might be additional defensive positions or escape routes that they hadn't accounted for. More importantly, the level of construction suggested that this was a permanent installation rather than a temporary hiding place, which meant the intelligence value of the site was potentially much higher than originally estimated. As they moved deeper into the bunker, they encountered their first human resistance. A heavily armed insurgent appeared from a concealed position in one of the side corridors, his AK-47 chattering an automatic fire that sent concrete chips flying from the walls around them. Morrison and Snake returned fire immediately, their superior training and equipment giving them a decisive advantage in the close-quarters firefight. The engagement was brief but intense, ending when Snake's precise marksmanship eliminated the threat. But the gunfire had alerted other defenders in the bunker, and they could hear movement and shouted commands coming from deeper in the complex. The element of surprise was gone, and they would need to clear the remaining chambers against prepared resistance. "Multiple rooms ahead," Morrison whispered into his radio, updating the command post on their progress. "Beginning clearance procedures." Maria found herself in a situation that her EOD training hadn't fully prepared her for: active combat in a confined space against an unknown number of enemy fighters. Her role was supposed to be limited to breaching operations, but the fluid nature of combat meant that every team member needed to be ready to engage targets and provide mutual support. The next chamber they encountered required another breaching operation, this time against a reinforced door that blocked access to what appeared to be the main command center. Maria could voices and electronic equipment beyond the barrier, suggesting that high-value targets were gathered in the protected space beyond. "Similar construction to the entrance," she assessed quickly, examining the door and surrounding framework, "but I can modify the charge placement for a smaller space." Working under the pressure of imminent contact, Maria assembled a smaller version of her shaped charge array, calculating the explosive force needed to breach the door without causing dangerous blast effects in the confined tunnel space. Her hands moved with the same steady precision she had shown earlier, but Morrison could see the increased tension in her posture as gunfire echoed from other parts of the bunker. The second breach was as successful as the first, creating a clean opening that allowed immediate entry into the command center beyond. What they found inside exceeded their most optimistic intelligence estimates: sophisticated communications equipment, detailed maps and operational plans, and 3 high-value targets who surrendered without resistance when confronted by the heavily armed SEAL operators. But the mission wasn't over yet.
The command center revealed the true scope of the intelligence windfall they had uncovered. Banks of sophisticated communications equipment lined the walls, much of it more advanced than anything they had expected to find in an insurgent facility. Computer terminals displayed detailed information about coalition patrol patterns, convoy schedules, and base security procedures that could only have come from high-level sources within the Iraqi government or military. Morrison quickly established security, while Snake began the process of securing the 3 detained individuals, 2 middle-aged men in civilian clothes and 1 younger man in military fatigues who appeared to be a former Iraqi army officer. Their surrender had been immediate and complete, suggesting that they understood the futility of resistance against elite American operators in a confined space. Maria found herself staring at documents and maps that revealed the extent of the insurgent network they had been fighting. The level of organization and intelligence gathering represented by the materials in this bunker indicated that they were facing a much more sophisticated enemy than anyone had realized. This wasn't a simple terrorist cell. This was a professional military organization with advanced planning capabilities and extensive resources. "Command, this is Razor," Morrison spoke into his radio, reporting their success to the mission command post.
Bunker secured, 3 enemy personnel in custody, significant intelligence materials recovered. We need immediate extraction and intelligence processing support. The response crackled back through his earpiece. Copy, Razor. Be advised. Enemy reinforcements approaching your position from multiple directions. Extraction helicopter inbound, but you may need to hold position for extended period. The tactical situation was rapidly evolving. The diversionary assault and systematic clearing of the compound had been successful, but the sound of combat had attracted attention from insurgent forces throughout the region. Intelligence intercepts suggested that enemy fighters were converging on their position from at least 3 different directions, with the potential for a significant counterattack before extraction could be completed. Morrison made the decision to establish a defensive perimeter using the bunker as their stronghold. The same reinforced construction that had made it difficult to breach would now work in their favor, providing protection against enemy fire and explosive attacks. But they would need to secure the surface buildings as well to prevent enemy fighters from dropping grenades or explosives down the access tunnel. Snake, get up top and coordinate with the rest of the team. Make sure we have overlapping fields of fire covering all approaches. Doc, continue processing intelligence materials. Photograph everything, download computer files, secure any documents that might be time-sensitive. As Snake departed for the surface, Maria found herself alone with Morrison and the detained insurgents in the command center. Her role in the mission was theoretically complete. The breaching operations had been successful beyond anyone's expectations, and the primary objective had been achieved. But combat operations rarely followed neat divisions of responsibility. "You did good work tonight," Morrison said quietly, acknowledging her contribution to the mission's success. "I owe you an apology for my attitude during the briefing." Maria was examining some of the explosive materials she had found in the bunker, trying to understand the insurgents' bomb-making capabilities and techniques. "No apology necessary," she replied. "Your concerns were legitimate. I was an unknown quantity, and you were responsible for the lives of your team." The professional exchange was interrupted by the sound of intensifying gunfire from above. The expected counterattack was beginning, with enemy forces probing the compound's defenses and looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Radio chatter from the surface team indicated that they were facing at least 30 enemy fighters with small arms, RPGs, and possibly heavier weapons. Morrison's tactical experience told him that they could hold their position indefinitely as long as their ammunition held out, but the extraction helicopter would need a secure landing zone to safely evacuate the team and their intelligence windfall. The enemy's obvious priority would be to prevent that extraction by either destroying a helicopter or making the landing zone too dangerous to approach. "How much explosive material do you have left?" Morrison asked Maria, an idea beginning to form in his tactical planning. Maria inventoried her remaining supplies, several conventional charges, some specialized cutting explosives, and components that could be configured into improvised Claymore-style directional weapons. "Enough for defensive applications," she said, understanding the direction of his thinking. "I can create shaped charges that would be very effective against personnel in the open areas around the compound." The concept was to use her advanced demolition skills, not just for breaching operations, but as a force multiplier in the defensive phase of the mission. By creating precisely placed explosive traps and directional charges, they could channel enemy movement and create killing zones that would make any assault on their position prohibitively costly. Working together, Morrison and Maria began planning the defensive employment of her remaining explosives. Her scientific approach to demolition proved as valuable for defensive operations as it had been for breaching. She could calculate blast patterns, fragmentation effects, and optimal placement to maximize the psychological and physical impact on attacking forces. "Place these charges at the compound entrances," Morrison directed, pointing to locations on a hand-drawn map of the compound. "When they try to rush our position, we can detonate them remotely to break up their assault formations." As Maria prepared her defensive charges, she reflected on how dramatically her role in the mission had evolved. She had begun as a specialized technician brought in to solve a specific problem, but combat had a way of demanding that everyone contribute to the team's survival. Her expertise was proving valuable in ways that went far beyond the original mission parameters. The sound of approaching helicopters could be heard in the distance. Their extraction was coming, but so were additional enemy reinforcements. The next 30 minutes would determine whether their successful mission would end in triumph or tragedy. Morrison checked his weapon and ammunition one final time, then looked at Maria with the respect that could only be earned through shared combat experience. Ready to finish this? She nodded, her hands steady as she armed the final defensive charge. Ready.
The first wave of the counterattack came exactly as Morrison had predicted, a coordinated assault from 3 directions designed to overwhelm the compound's defenders through sheer numbers and firepower. Enemy fighters moved through the darkness with the discipline of trained soldiers, using cover and concealment as they advanced toward the compound walls. But they had no way of knowing that their every movement was being tracked through night vision equipment by operators who had turned the fortified position into a deadly trap. Tank Rodriguez had repositioned his machine gun to cover the main approach route, and his disciplined fire cut down the first group of attackers before they could reach the outer perimeter. Tracer rounds illuminated the desert like deadly fireworks, while the distinctive sound of the M240B's sustained fire echoed across the landscape. But for every enemy fighter that fell, 2 more seemed to take his place. "Multiple contacts, east and west flanks," came Doc Patterson's voice over the radio. "They're trying to surround us." In the bunker below, Morrison monitored the tactical situation through radio reports, while Maria made final preparations for her defensive explosive array. Her charges had been placed at critical choke points around the compound, locations where attacking forces would naturally concentrate as they tried to breach the perimeter defenses. "Detonation control transferred to you," Maria announced, handing Morrison a small electronic device that would allow him to trigger her charges remotely. The shaped charges at positions Alpha and Bravo will create directional blast effects toward the main gate. Charlie and Delta positions are configured for maximum fragmentation against personnel in the open. Morrison studied the detonator, impressed by the sophistication of her improvised defensive system. Each charge could be triggered independently, allowing him to time the explosions for maximum tactical effect. It was a level of precision and control that conventional military demolition couldn't achieve. The sound of RPG explosions began to shake the building above them, indicating that the enemy was escalating their assault with heavier weapons. The insurgents had apparently brought rocket-propelled grenades and possibly recoilless rifles to breach the compound's defenses. But the same reinforced construction that had made the bunker difficult to access was now protecting the SEAL team from the devastating effects of the incoming fire. "Razor, this is Eagle Flight," came a new voice over the radio. "The extraction helicopter was approaching the area. We have eyes on multiple enemy positions around your location, requesting immediate marking of friendly positions for close air support." Morrison coordinated with his surface team to mark their defensive positions with infrared strobes that would be visible to the helicopter's advanced sensors, but invisible to enemy fighters on the ground. The arrival of close air support would shift the tactical balance significantly, but the helicopter would still need a secure landing zone to extract the team and their intelligence windfall. "Eagle Flight, this is Razor," Morrison responded. "Enemy forces concentrated in 3 main groups. Request gun runs on positions I'm about to mark." He triggered the first of Maria's shaped charges, creating a brilliant flash that illuminated enemy fighters who'd been advancing under cover of darkness. The explosion wasn't designed to cause massive casualties. Instead, it served as a precision marker that revealed exact enemy positions to the helicopter overhead. The psychological effect was equally important, demonstrating to the attackers that the defenders possessed capabilities they hadn't anticipated. The helicopter's response was immediate and devastating. Its door-mounted machine guns opened fire with surgical precision, engaging specific targets that had been revealed by the marker explosion. The 7.62mm rounds tore through enemy positions with the accuracy that could only be achieved through advanced targeting systems and highly trained aircrew. But the insurgents adapted quickly, breaking into smaller groups and using buildings and terrain features to avoid the helicopter's fire. Their tactics suggested professional military training rather than the improvised methods typical of irregular fighters. Someone was coordinating their assault with the skill of an experienced battlefield commander. "They're trying to get rocket teams into position to engage the helicopter," Snake Thompson reported from his Overwatch position, multiple RPG teams moving through the buildings to the north. Morrison made the tactical decision to trigger Maria's remaining charges in sequence, creating a wall of explosions that would disrupt enemy movement and channel any surviving attackers into predetermined killing zones. Her scientific approach to explosive placement had created overlapping blast effects that turned the approaches to the compound into an impassable obstacle course. The detonations came in rapid succession, each one precisely timed to maximize psychological impact while creating physical barriers that would force enemy fighters to expose themselves to defensive fire. Maria's calculations had been perfect. The explosions created clouds of dust and debris that obscured enemy vision while leaving clear fields of fire for the defending SEALs. In the temporary lull that followed the explosive barrage, Morrison coordinated the team's preparation for extraction. The intelligence materials they had recovered were too valuable to risk in a prolonged firefight, and the arrival of additional enemy reinforcements would eventually overwhelm their defensive capabilities regardless of how well prepared their position might be. "All elements, prepare for immediate extraction," Morrison commanded. "Package the intelligence materials for transport and establish security for helicopter landing." Maria worked alongside Doc Patterson to secure the computer hard drives, documents, and other materials they had recovered from the command center. The intelligence windfall was substantial. Operation plans, communication intercepts, financial records, and detailed information about insurgent networks that would take months to fully process. But getting it back to friendly territory required successfully completing the extraction under fire. As they prepared to move to the surface, Maria reflected on how dramatically her perspective on military operations had changed over the course of a single night. She had begun the mission as a technical specialist focused on solving a specific engineering problem, but combat had demanded that she contribute as a full team member in ways that went far beyond her original role. Her demolition expertise had proved valuable not just for breaching operations, but as a force multiplier that enhanced the team's defensive capabilities. More importantly, she had earned the respect of operators who had initially questioned her presence on the mission through demonstrated competence under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Morrison checked his equipment one final time, then turned to Maria with an expression that conveyed both respect and gratitude. "Your work tonight saved lives and made this mission possible," he said simply. "I was wrong about women in combat operations." The acknowledgement meant more to Maria than any formal commendation could have. Earning the respect of elite operators like Morrison required proving herself under conditions where failure meant death, not just for herself, but for the teammates who depended on her expertise. She had met that test and exceeded expectations in the process. The sound of the extraction helicopter grew louder as it approached the landing zone, but so did the sounds of enemy movement as insurgent forces regrouped for another assault. The most dangerous phase of the mission was still ahead, getting everyone safely aboard the aircraft and departing the area before enemy fire could bring down their ride home.
The extraction helicopter settled into the designated landing zone with the controlled urgency that characterized combat operations, its rotor wash creating a whirlwind of sand and debris that provided additional concealment from enemy observation. The aircrew maintained their engines at flight power, ready for immediate departure once the ground team was aboard. Every second spent on the ground increased the risk of enemy fire finding its mark. Morrison led the movement from the bunker to the surface, with Maria carrying critical intelligence materials while maintaining security alongside the other team members. The compound that had been the scene of intense fighting just minutes before was now eerily quiet, littered with evidence of the battle that had determined control of this strategically important position. Bodies of enemy fighters lay scattered around the perimeter, testimony to the effectiveness of both conventional firepower and Maria's precisely placed explosive charges. The insurgent assault had been broken by the combination of superior training, advanced equipment, and tactical innovation that characterized elite military operations. But Morrison knew that their victory was temporary. Additional enemy forces were already moving toward their position. 30 seconds to wheels up,
the helicopter pilot announced over the radio, his voice calm but urgent. "We have multiple heat signatures approaching from the east, approximately 2 minutes out." The team moved with practiced efficiency toward the aircraft, each operator carrying essential equipment while maintaining defensive positions that would allow them to respond to any last-minute threats. Maria found herself running across open ground under hostile fire for the first time in her military career, but her training and adrenaline carried her forward without hesitation. As they reached the helicopter, Tank Rodriguez provided covering fire with his machine gun while the rest of the team embarked. The distinctive sound of his M240B echoed across the desert, keeping enemy heads down during the critical moments when the team was most vulnerable. His suppressive fire was answered by scattered small arms fire from enemy positions, but the range and darkness made accurate shooting nearly impossible. Maria was among the last to board, helping to secure the intelligence materials and ensuring that nothing critical was left behind. As she climbed into the aircraft, she caught sight of Tank sprinting toward them under fire, his heavy weapon system making his movement slower than the rest of the team. Enemy tracers streaked past him in the darkness, close enough that she could see their light reflecting off his equipment. "Tank's taking fire," she shouted over the rotor noise, pointing toward the enemy positions that were engaging their teammate. Without thinking, she grabbed one of her remaining explosive charges and armed it for remote detonation. Morrison saw what she was doing and immediately understood her intention. "Do it," he commanded, trusting her judgment about the optimal timing for the detonation. Maria triggered the charge she had placed near the compound's eastern wall, creating a massive explosion that temporarily suppressed enemy fire and allowed Tank to reach the helicopter safely. Her quick thinking and tactical employment of demolitions had potentially saved his life, demonstrating once again that her expertise had value far beyond the original mission parameters. The helicopter lifted off immediately as Tank dove through the door, rising rapidly to avoid potential ground fire while turning toward friendly territory. Below them, the compound that had been the focus of their mission was already being abandoned by surviving enemy forces, who scattered into the desert rather than face additional airstrikes. As they gained altitude, Morrison conducted a quick head count to ensure that all team members were aboard and accounted for. The mission had been successful beyond their most optimistic projections. They had eliminated high-value targets, recovered invaluable intelligence, and demonstrated new techniques for dealing with hardened defensive positions. Most importantly, they had accomplished all of this without losing a single team member. Outstanding work, people. This was a textbook special operations mission executed with precision and professionalism under extreme conditions. He looked directly at Maria as he spoke, making it clear that his praise included her contributions to the mission's success. The woman who had been reluctantly accepted as a specialist had proven herself as a warrior worthy of serving alongside the most elite operators in the military. The helicopter continued its flight toward the forward operating base, where intelligence specialists would begin the lengthy process of analyzing the materials they had recovered. The documents, computer files, and prisoner interrogations would provide insights into insurgent operations that could save countless lives and help bring the conflict to a faster conclusion. Maria found herself reviewing the events of the night, still processing the intensity of her first direct combat mission with Special Operations Forces. Her technical expertise had been crucial to the mission's success, but she had also discovered capabilities within herself that went beyond mere technical competence. Working under fire alongside elite operators had revealed reserves of courage and tactical thinking that she hadn't known she possessed. The other team members were engaged in the post-mission routine that followed every combat operation, checking equipment, treating minor injuries, and beginning the mental process of transitioning from combat mode back to normal operations. But Maria noticed that their attitude toward her had changed fundamentally. The skepticism and professional distance that had characterized their initial interactions had been replaced by the respect and camaraderie that bound effective military units together. Snake Thompson approached her during the flight, offering a water bottle and a simple acknowledgement. "Good work tonight. Your demolition skills made the difference between mission success and mission failure." Doc Patterson nodded his agreement. "I've seen a lot of breaching operations, but nothing like what you did tonight. That was surgical precision under impossible conditions." Even Tank Rodriguez, whose life had potentially been saved by her quick thinking with the final explosive charge, offered his own tribute. "You've got a place on this team anytime, anywhere. That's not something we say lightly." The recognition from her teammates meant more to her than any formal award or commendation could. She had earned their respect through demonstrated competence under the most demanding conditions imaginable.
proving that effectiveness in combat depended on skill, courage, and dedication, rather than traditional assumptions about gender roles in military operations. As the helicopter approached their base, Morrison began planning the after-action review that would analyze every aspect of the mission and identify lessons learned for future operations. But one lesson was already clear. The integration of specialized technical expertise with traditional combat capabilities had created new possibilities for special operations missions that went beyond conventional approaches.
The debriefing room at the forward operating base buzzed with activity as intelligence specialists began their preliminary analysis of the materials recovered from the bunker. Computer technicians worked to extract data from captured hard drives, while Arabic linguists translated documents that revealed the scope and sophistication of the insurgent network they had disrupted. Morrison sat across from Maria in the stark military conference room, both of them still wearing their combat gear and carrying the distinctive smell of cordite and desert dust that characterized recent combat operations. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by the exhaustion that always followed intense military action, but the mission's success provided a sense of satisfaction that made the fatigue bearable. "The preliminary intelligence assessment is extraordinary," Colonel James Mitchell, the task force commander, announced as he entered the room with a folder of classified documents. "The materials you recovered have already provided actionable intelligence on insurgent operations throughout the sector. We're looking at potential follow-on missions that could eliminate entire enemy networks." The strategic impact of their mission was becoming clear as analysts processed the captured information. The bunker hadn't just been a local command post, it had been a regional coordination center that managed insurgent activities across multiple provinces. The operational plans, communication intercepts, and financial records they had recovered provided a comprehensive picture of enemy capabilities and intentions. "More importantly," Colonel Mitchell continued, "your innovative approach to the breaching problem has opened up new tactical possibilities for operations against hardened targets. Sergeant Gonzalez, your methodology is going to be studied and incorporated into special operations doctrine." Maria felt a mixture of pride and humility at the recognition. Her scientific approach to demolition had been vindicated under the most demanding conditions possible. But she was also aware that the mission's success had depended on the skills and courage of the entire team. Technical expertise alone wouldn't have been sufficient without the tactical proficiency and combat experience of the SEALs who had made the operation possible. "The shaped charge array technique you employed represents a significant advancement in precision demolition. We're already planning to incorporate similar capabilities into other special operations units, and we'll need experienced personnel to train those units in the new techniques." The conversation turned to the broader implications of integrating specialized technical expertise with traditional combat operations. The mission had demonstrated that the complexity of modern warfare required new approaches that combined conventional military skills with advanced scientific and engineering knowledge. The old barriers between technical specialists and combat operators were becoming obsolete in the face of increasingly sophisticated threats. Morrison found himself reevaluating many of his assumptions about team composition and operational effectiveness. His initial resistance to including Maria on the mission had been based on legitimate concerns about unit cohesion and combat effectiveness, but those concerns had been proven unfounded by actual performance under fire. Her technical skills had been crucial to mission success, while her personal courage and tactical adaptability had earned her full acceptance as a team member. "I need to apologize publicly for my initial resistance to this assignment," Morrison said, addressing both Maria and Colonel Mitchell. "My concerns about operational effectiveness were based on outdated assumptions rather than objective assessment of capabilities." The acknowledgement was significant, coming from an operator of Morrison's stature and experience. His reputation within the special operations community carried weight that extended far beyond his immediate unit, and his public endorsement of integrated operations would influence policy decisions throughout the military. Maria appreciated the gesture, but was more interested in the practical implications of the mission's success. What are the next steps for implementing this approach more broadly? The techniques we used tonight were specifically tailored to this target, but the underlying principles could be adapted for a wide range of operational requirements.
The discussion that followed outlined an ambitious program to integrate advanced technical capabilities with special operations units throughout the military. The success of their mission had demonstrated the potential for precision demolition, advanced communications, cyber warfare, and other specialized skills to enhance traditional combat effectiveness in ways that hadn't been previously considered. But the most significant outcome wasn't technological. It was cultural. The mission had proven that effectiveness in combat depended on individual competence and team cohesion, rather than traditional assumptions about gender roles or military occupational specialties. The barriers that had historically limited opportunities for women in combat operations were being challenged by demonstrated performance under the most demanding conditions. Over the following hours, as the team completed their debriefing and prepared for rest, Maria reflected on how dramatically her military career had changed in the span of a single night. She had begun the deployment as a technical specialist operating on the margins of combat operations, but the mission had established her as a full-fledged member of the special operations community. The respect she had earned from Morrison and his team wasn't based on political correctness or social engineering. It was the hard-won recognition that came from proven performance under fire. She had demonstrated that her technical expertise could be seamlessly integrated with traditional combat operations to achieve results that neither approach could accomplish alone. The SEAL team leader who had said, "No women," had become her strongest advocate, and her demolition skills had opened more than just a fortified bunker. They had opened new possibilities for women in combat operations throughout the U.S. military.
6 months after the bunker mission, Maria found herself standing in front of a classroom filled with special operations personnel from across the military branches. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Air Force Pararescue, and Marine Force reconnaissance operators sat in the chairs before her, their attention focused on the complex diagrams and equations she had drawn on the whiteboard. The key to precision demolition isn't the size of the explosion, she explained, repeating the same principle she had tried to convey to Morrison's team before their mission. It's understanding how energy travels through different materials and using that knowledge to create precisely controlled structural failures. The Advanced Military Demolition School had been established specifically to train special operations personnel in the techniques that Maria had pioneered during the bunker operation. The success of that mission had convinced military leadership that traditional demolition methods were inadequate for the increasingly sophisticated defensive structures they were encountering in modern warfare. Her students represented the most elite units in the American military, but they approached her instruction with the same respect and attention they would give to any other subject matter expert. The skepticism and resistance she had once encountered had been replaced by genuine interest in learning techniques that could save lives and ensure mission success. Morrison himself had become one of her strongest advocates within the special operations community, using his influence to promote the integration of advanced technical capabilities with traditional combat operations. His public support had been crucial in overcoming institutional resistance to change, and his endorsement carried weight with operators who might otherwise have been skeptical of new approaches. The shaped charge array technique requires precise calculations, Maria continued, moving to a practical demonstration with inert training materials. But once you understand the underlying physics, you can adapt the principles to virtually any target structure. Her teaching methodology emphasized practical application over theoretical knowledge, ensuring that her students could employ the techniques under combat conditions rather than just in classroom settings. The training scenarios were based on actual missions, including detailed case studies of the bunker operation that had first demonstrated the effectiveness of precision demolition. The success of the training program had already begun to influence special operations missions throughout the world. Units that had completed Maria's course were reporting significant improvements in their ability to breach hardened targets while minimizing collateral damage and preserving valuable intelligence materials. The techniques were proving particularly valuable in urban warfare environments where precision was essential. But the broader impact extended far beyond technical capabilities. The integration of women into special operations units was accelerating as commanders recognized that mission effectiveness depended on individual competence rather than traditional gender assumptions. Maria's success had opened doors for other women seeking to serve in combat roles previously closed to them. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a Navy explosive ordnance disposal officer, was among the students in Maria's current class. She had requested assignment to the course specifically because of Maria's example, hoping to follow a similar path into special operations. Seeing what you accomplished made me realize that the barriers weren't as insurmountable as they seemed, she told Maria during a break between training sessions. The conversation reflected a broader transformation taking place throughout the military, as combat-tested women proved their effectiveness in roles that had once been exclusively male. Policy changes were following operational reality, with formal restrictions being lifted in recognition of what was already happening on the battlefield. Maria's own career had continued to evolve in unexpected directions. Her technical expertise and combat experience had made her a sought-after advisor for operations planning, and she found herself consulting on missions that went beyond traditional demolition requirements. The integration of scientific expertise with operational planning was creating new possibilities for military effectiveness. The intelligence windfall from the bunker mission continued to pay dividends as analysts uncovered connections and patterns that revealed the structure of insurgent networks across multiple countries. Follow-on operations based on that intelligence had eliminated dozens of high-value targets and disrupted enemy operations on a strategic scale. The success had validated the risks taken during the original mission and demonstrated the value of innovative approaches to complex problems. Morrison himself had become a vocal advocate for adaptive thinking and operational innovation, using his reputation to challenge conventional wisdom and promote new approaches to special operations. The biggest lesson from that mission wasn't about demolition techniques, he told Maria during one of his visits. It was about the importance of keeping an open mind and recognizing that effectiveness comes from unexpected places. His evolution from skeptical team leader to enthusiastic supporter reflected broader changes taking place throughout the special operations community. The increasing complexity of modern warfare was forcing military leaders to reconsider traditional assumptions about personnel, tactics, and equipment in favor of approaches that prioritize mission success rather than adherence to conventional doctrine. As Maria concluded her latest training session, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that night in the Iraqi desert. The technical specialist who had been reluctantly accepted for a single mission had become a recognized expert whose innovations were influencing military operations worldwide. But more importantly, she had helped prove that combat effectiveness depended on skill, courage, and dedication rather than gender or traditional military roles. The fortified bunker that had once seemed impregnable had been opened by precision, scientific knowledge, and innovative thinking. In the same way, the barriers that had once limited opportunities for women in military service were being overcome by demonstrated competence and proven performance under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The SEAL team leader who had once said, "No women," had learned that excellence in combat knew no gender boundaries, and his evolution had helped open new possibilities for an entire generation of military personnel ready to serve their country in whatever capacity their skills and courage might allow.
2 years after the bunker mission, Maria stood on the parade ground at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching as a new class of Navy SEAL candidates struggled through their final training exercises. The site brought back memories of her own journey through the military's elite special operations community. But the landscape had changed dramatically since her groundbreaking mission in Iraq. The integration of women into special operations units was no longer a controversial experiment. It had become standard operational procedure based on proven effectiveness and mission success. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable had been systematically dismantled through demonstrated competence and the advocacy of leaders like Morrison, who had witnessed the transformation firsthand. The candidates are struggling with the precision demolition scenarios, observed Commander Lisa Rodriguez, the officer in charge of the advanced training program. They're still thinking like traditional demolition specialists rather than surgical technicians. Maria nodded, recognizing the same challenges she had faced when first developing her innovative approaches to breaching operations. The transition from conventional military thinking to precision-based techniques
required a fundamental shift in mindset that couldn't be accomplished through classroom instruction alone. It required hands-on experience under pressure, the kind of learning that could only come from real-world application. The techniques we developed have applications far beyond special operations, Maria reflected, watching as the candidates attempted to solve complex breaching problems using her methodologies. Construction, mining, disaster response, anywhere you need to move large amounts of material with surgical precision. Her influence had indeed extended far beyond the military. The precision demolition techniques pioneered during the bunker mission were being adapted for civilian applications, ranging from urban construction projects to disaster response operations. The same scientific principles that had enabled her to breach a fortified bunker were now being used to safely demolish buildings in crowded urban areas and create rescue passages through collapsed structures. The success of these civilian applications had brought additional recognition to Maria's innovations, with engineering schools incorporating her techniques into their curricula, and construction companies seeking her consultation on complex demolition projects. But her primary focus remained on military applications and the training of the next generation of special operations personnel. Morrison approached them across the parade ground, his gait still carrying the confident bearing of an elite operator, despite his recent promotion to command responsibilities. His advocacy for integrated operations and innovative thinking had earned him recognition throughout the special operations community, and his current assignment involved developing new training programs that incorporated lessons learned from recent combat operations. The after-action reports from last month's operations in Syria confirm what we learned during the bunker mission. Integrated teams with specialized technical capabilities are consistently outperforming conventional units in complex scenarios. The ongoing conflicts in the Middle East continue to provide testing grounds for the innovations that had emerged from Maria's original mission. Special operations units equipped with precision demolition capabilities are achieving mission success rates that significantly exceeded historical averages while minimizing collateral damage and preserving valuable intelligence materials. The enemy is adapting too, Commander Rodriguez observed. Intelligence reports indicate that hostile forces are incorporating lessons learned from our operations, upgrading their defensive positions and developing countermeasures specifically designed to defeat precision breaching techniques. The technological and tactical arms race that characterized modern warfare was accelerating as both sides adapted to new realities. The same innovations that had given American forces significant advantages were being studied and countered by adversaries who understood that survival depended on continuous evolution and adaptation. Maria had anticipated this development and was already working on next-generation techniques that would maintain the technological edge that precision demolition provided. Her research involved collaboration with materials scientists, computer engineers, and artificial intelligence specialists to develop automated systems that could analyze defensive structures and calculate optimal breaching solutions in real time. The future of special operations will depend on our ability to integrate human expertise with advanced technology. She explained, outlining her vision for the next phase of military innovation. Automated analysis systems can process structural data faster than any human, but human judgment and creativity will always be essential for adapting to unexpected conditions. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of explosions from the training area where the SEAL candidates were attempting their final demolition exercise. Maria watched through binoculars as the candidates struggled with a scenario based directly on the bunker mission, a reinforced concrete structure that required precision breaching techniques to access without destroying the contents. "They're using too much explosive force," she observed, noting the excessive blast effects that indicated improper charge calculation. The target structure would collapse before they could extract any intelligence. Morrison smiled, remembering his own initial skepticism about Maria's unconventional approaches. "Why don't you show them how it's done?" Maria accepted the challenge, gathering her demonstration equipment and approaching the training structure that the candidates had been unable to breach successfully.
The scenario was designed to test the same skills and techniques that had been crucial during the original bunker mission, with similar structural challenges and time constraints. Working with the focused precision that had become her trademark, Maria analyzed the target structure and calculated the optimal charge placement for a surgical breach. Her movements were efficient and confident, drawing on years of experience and countless training repetitions to solve the complex engineering problem. The demonstration blast was perfectly controlled, creating a clean opening that would allow immediate access while preserving the integrity of the surrounding structure. The watching candidates erupted in applause, recognizing the level of skill and expertise required to achieve such precision under pressure. "That's the standard you're training to meet," Morrison announced to the assembled candidates. "Precision, innovation, and adaptability under the most demanding conditions imaginable." As the training exercise concluded, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her from reluctant mission specialist to recognized expert and influential teacher. The path had been challenging and sometimes dangerous, but it had ultimately led to innovations and opportunities that extended far beyond her original expectations. The barriers that had once limited her career advancement had been transformed into stepping stones that enabled her to reach levels of influence and recognition that would have been impossible under the old system. Her success had helped pave the way for other women seeking to serve in combat roles, while her technical innovations had enhanced the effectiveness of special operations units worldwide.
5 years had passed since the night Maria first stepped into that Black Hawk helicopter as an unwelcome addition to Morrison's SEAL team. Now, as she stood in the Pentagon briefing room addressing senior military leaders from across the Department of Defense, it was clear that her influence had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined during that contentious pre-mission briefing. The integration of precision demolition techniques with special operations has resulted in a 300% increase in mission success rates against hardened targets, she reported to the assembled generals and admirals. More importantly, we've achieved these results while reducing collateral damage by 75% and increasing intelligence recovery by 400%. The statistics told the story of a fundamental transformation in military capabilities that had begun with a single innovative approach to a complex engineering problem. But the broader implications extended far beyond technical improvements. They represented a new paradigm for military effectiveness that emphasized adaptability, innovation, and the integration of diverse expertise. Admiral Sarah McKenna, the first woman to serve as Chief of Naval Operations, nodded approvingly as Maria concluded her presentation. The success of this program demonstrates the importance of identifying and developing innovative capabilities regardless of their source, she observed. Traditional approaches to personnel and tactics must evolve to meet the challenges of modern warfare. The meeting represented the culmination of years of advocacy and institutional change that had transformed the military's approach to special operations and personnel policy. The barriers that had once prevented women from serving in combat roles had been systematically eliminated, replaced by merit-based standards that emphasized capability over demographics. Morrison, now a rear admiral responsible for special operations training and doctrine development, had become one of the most vocal advocates for these changes. His evolution from skeptical team leader to institutional reformer reflected the broader transformation that had taken place throughout the military as combat-tested performance replaced traditional assumptions. The lesson we learned from Sergeant Gonzalez's mission wasn't just about demolition techniques. It was about the importance of recognizing excellence wherever it exists and creating systems that allow that excellence to flourish. The institutional changes that had followed Maria's successful mission extended far beyond special operations. The military's approach to personnel policy, training programs, and operational doctrine had been fundamentally revised to emphasize adaptability and innovation over adherence to traditional practices. The results had been measurable improvements in effectiveness across multiple mission areas. Maria's own career had continued to evolve in directions that would have been impossible under the old system. Her current position as Director of Advanced Military Technologies involved oversight of research and development programs that were defining the future of military capabilities.
Her scientific background and combat experience provided a unique perspective that bridged the gap between theoretical possibility and practical application. The next generation of challenges will require even greater integration of diverse expertise, Maria explained, outlining her vision for future military capabilities. Artificial intelligence, robotics, advanced materials science, these technologies will only reach their full potential when combined with human creativity and tactical experience. The presentation concluded with a video message from the current SEAL team operating in a classified location, demonstrating the latest evolution of the precision demolition techniques that Maria had pioneered. The technology had advanced significantly since her original mission, incorporating automated analysis systems and robotically controlled charge placement that could achieve surgical precision under any conditions. But the human element remained crucial. The operators in the video moved with the same professional competence and tactical awareness that had characterized Morrison's original team, adapted to incorporate new capabilities while maintaining the fundamental skills that defined elite military performance. As the meeting concluded, Maria found herself reflecting on the unexpected journey that had brought her from technical specialist to institutional innovator. The resistance she had initially encountered had been based on legitimate concerns about unit cohesion and operational effectiveness, but those concerns had been overcome through demonstrated performance and proven results. The transformation hadn't been easy or automatic. It had required years of advocacy, institutional change, and the gradual recognition that military effectiveness depended on capability rather than traditional assumptions about personnel and tactics. Morrison approached her after the meeting, carrying the same expression of professional respect that had replaced his initial skepticism during that first mission. "The ripple effects from that night in Iraq are still spreading," he observed. "Every successful mission using precision demolition techniques, every woman who enters special operations, every innovation that challenges traditional thinking, they all trace back to what you accomplished in that bunker." Maria appreciated the recognition, but remained focused on future challenges rather than past achievements. "The techniques we developed were just the beginning," she replied. "The real innovation was proving that effectiveness comes from competence and creativity, not from adherence to traditional limitations." The conversation was interrupted by an aide who approached with a classified message folder. Maria reviewed the contents quickly, recognizing the intelligence indicators that suggested another complex special operations mission was being planned, one that would require the same combination of technical expertise and tactical innovation that had characterized her original breakthrough. "Looks like we have another impossible target that needs opening," she said with a smile, remembering the satisfaction of solving engineering problems that conventional wisdom declared unsolvable. Morrison returned the smile, his expression carrying the confidence of a lunar who had learned to embrace innovation rather than resist it. "Good thing we know someone who specializes in making the impossible possible." As they left the Pentagon briefing room, Maria reflected on how completely the military landscape had changed since that night when a SEAL team leader had declared no women for his mission. The barriers that had once seemed unsurmountable had been systematically overcome through competence, courage, and the recognition that excellence knows no boundaries. The fortified bunker that had challenged conventional military capabilities had been opened through precision, innovation, and scientific expertise. In the same way, the institutional barriers that had limited opportunities for women in military service had been overcome through demonstrated performance and proven results under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The story that had begun with resistance and skepticism had evolved into a transformation that enhanced military capabilities while opening new possibilities for service members ready to serve their country with distinction. Maria's legacy wasn't just measured in the technical innovations she had developed or the barriers she had broken down. It was reflected in the countless missions that had succeeded because of precision demolition techniques, the lives that had been saved through reduced collateral damage, and the intelligence that had been preserved through surgical breaching methods. But perhaps most importantly, her story had demonstrated that the strength of America's military came not from rigid adherence to tradition, but from its ability to recognize and develop excellence wherever it existed. The SEAL team leader who had once said no women had learned that the most dangerous enemy of military effectiveness was not external threats, but internal limitations that prevented the full utilization of available talent and capability. The fortified bunker that had seemed impregnable had been opened by someone who approached the problem differently, who combined scientific knowledge with tactical innovation to achieve results that conventional methods couldn't. In breaking through that reinforced concrete barrier, Maria had also broken through institutional barriers that had limited the military's ability to adapt and excel in an ever-changing world. The mission that had begun with reluctant acceptance had ended with fundamental transformation. The explosive charges that had opened a fortified position had opened minds, created opportunities, and established new standards for military excellence that would influence operations for generations to come. Years later, when military historians studied the evolution of special operations capabilities, they would identify that night in the Iraqi desert as a turning point, not just in tactical development, but in the broader transformation of military culture. The story of the SEAL team leader who said no women until her demo skills opened the fortified bunker had become more than just a successful mission. It had become proof that America's military strength came from its willingness to embrace innovation, recognize excellence, and adapt to new realities rather than cling to outdated assumptions. The barriers that had once limited military effectiveness had been systematically dismantled, replaced by merit-based standards that ensured the best personnel could serve in whatever capacity their skills and dedication merited. And in the end, that transformation had made America's military not just more inclusive, but more effective, more innovative, and more capable of meeting the challenges of an uncertain and dangerous world. The fortified bunker had just been the beginning. The real breakthrough was the recognition that excellence knows no boundaries, and that the most powerful weapon in any military arsenal is the willingness to challenge conventional wisdom in pursuit of better results.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.